Sarah's left eye had swollen shut 3 hours ago. She sat on the cold bathroom floor, knees pulled tight to her chest, listening to Michael's boots thunder across the floorboards above. The house shook with each heavy step. He was looking for her. Again. Always again. Sarah. His voice cracked like a whip through the walls, sharp and demanding. Get out here right now. She pressed her trembling fingers against the cold tile, steadying her breathing. Count to 10. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. The bathroom window stood open just 2 inches. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a moon so bright it hurt to look at. Freedom waited out there in that vast wasteland. Death probably waited too. But death was already here, circling her like a hungry vulture waiting for the kill. But death was already here, circling her like a vulture. Michael had promised this morning would be different. He'd kissed her forehead at breakfast, gentle as a dove. I'm sorry, baby, he'd whispered. I don't know what comes over me. Sarah had believed him for the 300th time. She'd smiled and poured him more coffee, her ribs aching from where he'd kicked her 2 nights before. By noon, the monster had returned. The trigger was small. She'd folded his shirt wrong. The sleeves weren't crisp enough. Such a tiny thing. Such enormous consequences. His fist had come fast, connecting with her cheekbone before she could raise her hands. The second blow caught her temple. She'd fallen against the kitchen counter, tasting copper and terror. As Michael stood over her, chest heaving, something inside Sarah finally broke. Not her bones this time. Something deeper. The last fragile thread of hope that he would change. I loved you, he'd said, grabbing her hair. Why do you make me do this? But his eyes told a different story. They burned with something Sarah had finally learned to recognize. Pleasure. He enjoyed this. He'd always enjoyed this. Now, hiding in the bathroom while he raged through their home, Sarah made a decision that would alter everything. She was 27 years old. She would not die at 28 in this house, in this prison, at the hands of a man who'd promised to cherish her. The bathroom window beckoned. Sarah stood on shaking legs. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Swollen face. Split lip. Bruises blooming purple and yellow across her neck. Who was this broken woman staring back at her? She barely remembered the bright-eyed girl who'd married Michael 5 years ago, full of dreams about a beautiful future. Sarah. The doorknob rattled. Open this door before I break it down. She had maybe 30 seconds. Sarah grabbed the pillowcase she'd hidden behind the toilet yesterday. Inside were $300 she'd been stealing from Michael's wallet over 6 months, $5 at a time. A bottle of water. A granola bar. Her mother's silver locket. Not much to build a new life on, but she had no choice. The door frame cracked as Michael's shoulder hit it. Sarah climbed onto the toilet, pushed the window open wide, and squeezed through. The frame scraped her ribs. She bit her tongue to keep from crying out. Then she was falling, landing hard in the dirt beside the house. Michael's roar echoed through the night. You can't hide from me. Sarah ran. She sprinted toward the desert, her bare feet pounding against sand and stone. Behind her, the front door exploded open. Light spilled across the yard. Michael's silhouette filled the doorway, broad and terrifying. You're dead, he screamed. You hear me? Dead. But Sarah didn't look back. She ran into the wasteland as the moon watched silently overhead. Cacti rose around her like sentinels. The earth was hard and cruel beneath her feet. Each step sent pain shooting through her body, but she pushed forward. The house lights faded behind her. Darkness swallowed her whole. The desert was a vast nothing, stretching in every direction without mercy or comfort. Sarah had no map, no phone, no real plan. She only knew she had to put distance between herself and the man who would kill her if he caught her. So she ran until her lungs burned. She ran until her legs trembled. She ran until she couldn't hear his voice anymore. Then she kept running into the wasteland, toward an uncertain future that had to be better than the certain death she'd left behind. The desert wanted Sarah dead. She understood this by dawn of the first day when the sun rose like a furnace door opening. Heat slammed into her from every angle, bouncing off sand and stone, turning the air into liquid fire. Sarah's lips cracked within hours. Her tongue grew thick in her mouth. The single bottle of water she'd brought lasted until midday. She rationed it carefully, taking tiny sips, but the desert was greedy. It drank her sweat, her tears, her hope. By the time the bottle was empty, Sarah's hands shook so badly she could barely grip the plastic. She walked because stopping meant dying. Her feet were torn and bleeding, leaving small red prints in the sand. Each cactus spine that pierced her skin was agony. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear that Michael was following her, that any moment she'd hear his truck roaring across the wasteland. Night brought different horrors. The temperature plummeted. Sarah's thin cotton dress provided no warmth against the cold that seeped into her bones. She curled beneath a rocky outcrop, teeth chattering, watching stars wheel overhead in their ancient dance. Beautiful and indifferent. She thought about her mother then. Dead 6 years now from cancer. What would she say if she could see her daughter like this? Bruised, broken, dying slowly in the desert? Sarah's mother had never liked Michael. There's something wrong in his eyes, she'd whispered once. But Sarah had been young and in love, deaf to warnings. I'm sorry, Mama, Sarah whispered to the stars. You were right. The second day brought hallucinations. Sarah saw water shimmering on the horizon, always just out of reach. She saw her old bedroom from childhood. She saw Michael standing before her, and she screamed, stumbling backward over rocks, before realizing he was just a twisted Joshua tree. Her mind was fracturing. She knew this but couldn't stop it. Dehydration was killing her brain cells one by one. Soon she wouldn't be able to think clearly enough to save herself. If salvation was even possible out here. By the third day, Sarah could barely walk. She crawled instead, hands and knees against burning sand. Her vision blurred. The world tilted sideways. She vomited nothing but bile, her body desperately trying to purge the poison of her dying cells. Please, she whispered to no one. To God maybe, if he was listening. Please, I just wanted to be free. She thought about Michael finding her body months from now. Would he feel anything? Remorse? Relief? Or would he simply move on to another woman, another victim to break slowly under his fists? The sun was directly overhead when Sarah finally collapsed. She couldn't rise again. Her muscles had given up. Her heart hammered weakly against her ribs, struggling to pump blood through her dehydrated veins. This was it. The end she'd escaped to find. Strange, but she felt almost peaceful. At least Michael couldn't hurt her anymore. At least she'd die free, under open sky, rather than in that house of horrors. Sarah closed her eyes. Hoofbeats. At first, she thought the sound was another hallucination. But it grew louder, more real. The thunder of horses approaching fast. Sarah tried to lift her head and failed. Sand filled her mouth. Voices called out in a language she didn't understand. Hands touched her, gentle but urgent. Someone lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Water touched her lips, and she gasped, choking, desperate. Easy, a deep voice said in English. Slow. You'll make yourself sick. Sarah forced her working eye open. A man's face filled her vision. Dark eyes, long black hair pulled back, features carved like the desert stone around them. He was older, maybe 50, with lines of wisdom and pain etched around his mouth. Who are you? Sarah croaked. I am Chief Joseph Broken Arrow, he said quietly. And you are dying on my people's land. Let me die, Sarah whispered. She was so tired. Too tired to fight anymore. The chief shook his head. The desert has tested you and found you worthy to live. Who am I to argue with the desert? He lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness. Besides, a woman who runs into the wasteland alone is running from something terrible. That kind of courage deserves a chance. Sarah's head lolled against his chest as the horse began to move. She caught glimpses of other riders, men and women on horseback, faces concerned and curious. The chief's heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. Strong and sure. My husband, she managed to say. He'll come looking. Let him come, Chief Broken Arrow said, and there was iron in his voice. He'll find only desert and my people. Neither shows mercy to men who hurt women. Sarah let herself believe him. Just for a moment, she let herself hope that maybe, possibly, she might actually survive this. Then darkness pulled her under, and she knew nothing more. When Sarah woke again, everything had changed. Sarah woke to the sound of women singing. The melody was haunting, wordless, rising and falling like wind through canyons. She lay on something soft, wrapped in blankets that smelled of sage and wood smoke. Her body ached everywhere, but it was different from the pain Michael had caused. This was the honest pain of healing. You've been asleep for 2 days, a woman's voice said gently. Sarah turned her head. An elderly woman sat beside her, mixing something in a clay bowl. Her hair was silver, braided down her back, and her face held 1,000 stories in its lines. She wore a simple dress with intricate beadwork across the shoulders. Where am I? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Safe, the woman replied. I am Margaret Whitefeather. I've been caring for you. She held out a cup. Drink this. It will help with the pain. Sarah struggled to sit up. She was in a small structure, walls made of what looked like canvas stretched over wooden frames. Sunlight filtered through, painting everything in golden tones. Her feet were bandaged. Her wounds had been cleaned and dressed. The chief brought you, Margaret continued, watching Sarah drink the bitter tea. He said the desert sent him to find you. Our hunters were tracking antelope when they saw you collapse. Sarah touched her face carefully. The swelling had gone down. Someone had tended to her bruises with cool compresses and healing salves. Why are you helping me? The question came out small and broken. Margaret's eyes grew soft. Because we know what it means to run from those who want to destroy us. Our people have been running for generations. We recognize our own. She paused. Also, Chief Joseph said you had the look of someone who'd crossed through fire and refused to burn. Over the next week, Sarah learned about the community that had saved her. They were Lakota, descendants of those who'd refused reservation life, carving out an existence on land most people considered worthless. 53 people lived here, in a settlement hidden in a desert valley where springs provided water and determination provided everything else. They grew vegetables in carefully tended gardens. They raised horses and goats. They lived according to old ways while adapting to new realities. And they protected each other with fierce loyalty. Chief Joseph visited Sarah every evening. He never asked about her past directly, but he made it clear she was welcome to stay as long as she needed. Healing takes time, he said one night, sitting cross-legged outside her shelter as the sun set. Physical wounds close fast. The other kind? Those take longer. Sarah found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. About Michael's charm when they first met. How he'd isolated her from friends and family so gradually she hadn't noticed until it was too late. The way he'd apologize after each beating, making her believe she was the problem. My daughter was like you, Joseph said quietly when Sarah finished. Her husband put her in the hospital 3 times before she finally left him. He looked out at the desert, jaw tight. She lives in Colorado now. Happy. Free. But it took years for her to believe she deserved that freedom. What happened to her husband? He came looking for her once. Joseph's voice was flat. The desert can be a dangerous place for those who don't respect it. He was never found. Sarah should have been frightened by the implication. Instead, she felt something close to satisfaction. As Sarah grew stronger, the women of the community taught her their ways. Margaret showed her which desert plants held water, which could heal, which could kill. A younger woman named Rose taught her to ride horses again, something Sarah had loved as a child but Michael had forbidden. You're good at this, Rose said, watching Sarah canter across the valley. Natural. Sarah felt wind in her hair and sun on her face. She felt alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. When was the last time Michael had allowed her to feel joy? Years ago, maybe. Or perhaps never. The children of the settlement were drawn to Sarah. They brought her flowers they'd picked, asked her to tell them stories. She invented tales for them, wild adventures about brave women and clever rabbits, and their laughter was medicine she hadn't known she needed. But at night, Sarah still woke screaming. She dreamed of Michael finding her, dragging her back. She dreamed of his fists, his rage, his promises that she'd never escape him. Margaret would come to her then, holding her while she shook, singing those wordless songs until Sarah's heartbeat slowed. The fear won't leave all at once, Margaret told her. It lives in your bones now. But each day it will get smaller. Each day you'll remember that you're the one who survived. 3 weeks after her rescue, Sarah stood at the edge of the valley, looking out at the desert that had nearly killed her. It stretched endlessly, beautiful and brutal. She'd crossed it alone and lived. That had to mean something. What are you thinking? Joseph had approached silently, a skill all the hunters seemed to possess. I'm thinking I don't know who I am anymore, Sarah admitted. I was Michael's wife for so long. Before that, I was someone's daughter, someone's friend. But who am I now? Joseph considered this. You're the woman who chose life over death. You're the woman who ran into the wasteland with nothing and survived. That's not nothing, Sarah. That's everything. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks. Good tears this time. I want to stay, she whispered. If you'll let me. I want to learn to be strong like your people. I want to learn to be free. Joseph smiled, rare and genuine. You already are free. You just haven't realized it yet. Michael came on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Sarah had escaped. She was working in the garden with Rose when the sound of an engine cut through the desert silence. Every head turned toward the valley entrance. Vehicles were rare out here. Visitors were rarer still. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that engine. She'd heard it 1,000 times pulling into their driveway, each arrival a question mark of terror. Would he be kind today or cruel? Would she survive the night? Sarah? Rose touched her arm. What's wrong? You've gone white. It's him, Sarah whispered. It's Michael. The truck appeared over the ridge, kicking up dust, moving too fast for the rough terrain. Sarah could see him through the windshield, jaw set, eyes scanning. Hunting. Within seconds, the entire settlement mobilized. Women gathered children and moved them toward the shelters. Men appeared from everywhere, some on horseback, others on foot. They formed a loose circle around the truck as it skidded to a stop in the center of the valley. Chief Joseph walked forward calmly, hands relaxed at his sides. But Sarah noticed the other men had positioned themselves strategically, blocking any path back to the valley entrance. Michael climbed out of the truck. He looked exactly as Sarah remembered. Tall, handsome, with sandy hair and blue eyes that had once made her heart flutter. Now they made her stomach clench with fear. I'm looking for my wife, he called out, voice carrying across the valley. Sarah Mitchell. Someone said they saw her out here. This is private land, Joseph replied evenly. You're trespassing. I don't care about your land. I want my wife. Michael's eyes swept the gathered crowd, and Sarah knew the moment he spotted her. His face transformed from false concern to triumph. Sarah. Thank God. Baby, I've been so worried. He started toward her. 3 men stepped into his path. She doesn't want to see you, one of them said. It was Thomas, Rose's husband, a man who stood 6'4" and looked like he'd been carved from granite. Michael's mask slipped. The monster underneath showed through. Get out of my way. That's my wife. She's coming home with me. No, Sarah said. Her voice shook, but she said it. I'm not. She walked forward until she stood beside Joseph, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Michael's eyes locked onto her face, and she saw him take in her healing bruises, her thin frame, the way she stood differently now. Straighter. Look what you've done to yourself, he said, voice dripping with false sympathy. Sarah, honey, you're not well. You need help. Come home and we'll work through this together. You mean you'll beat me until I stop trying to leave? Sarah's voice grew stronger. Like you always do. Michael's jaw tightened. I never touched you. You fell. You're clumsy. Don't you remember? You're always hurting yourself. The gaslighting was so familiar it made Sarah's head spin. How many times had he convinced her that her reality wasn't real? That her bruises came from her own clumsiness, her broken ribs from a fall, her split lip from biting down too hard? I remember everything, Sarah said clearly. Every punch. Every kick. Every time you choked me until I saw stars. Every promise you made and broke. I remember all of it, Michael. His face darkened. The pretense dropped completely. You're my wife. You made vows. In sickness and health, remember? You belong to me. She belongs to herself, Chief Joseph said quietly. And you're not welcome here. Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you can keep her from me? You people? The slur dripped with contempt. I'll call the police. I'll tell them you're holding my wife against her will. I'll tell them you kidnapped her. Do it, Joseph said. Call them. We'll wait. He pulled out his own phone and held it out. Tell them how you beat your wife so badly she ran into the desert to escape you. Tell them about the hospital records we found from her 3 emergency room visits. Tell them about the neighbors who called police 4 times, but she was too afraid to press charges. Michael's expression twisted with rage. You have no proof of anything. The proof is standing right here. Joseph gestured to Sarah's face. Your wife ran barefoot into the wasteland. She nearly died. A woman doesn't do that unless she's more afraid of her husband than of death itself. Michael took a step toward Sarah, and suddenly there were a dozen men between them, forming a human wall. His hands clenched into fists, the same fists that had broken her so many times. Sarah, he said, voice low and dangerous. If you don't come with me right now, you'll regret it. I will make your life hell. I will find you wherever you go. You know I will. And Sarah knew he meant it. Michael was a man who never let anything go, especially not something he considered his property. He would hunt her for years if necessary. He would never stop. Unless she stopped him. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Sarah said. The words felt like truth and lie tangled together. She was terrified. But she was also done running. You don't own me. You never did. Michael's face went purple with fury. He lunged forward, but the men grabbed him, holding him back. He fought like a wild animal, screaming obscenities, spitting rage. Get him off our land, Joseph said calmly. And make sure he understands what happens if he comes back. They dragged Michael to his truck and threw him inside. Thomas leaned through the window, speaking too quietly for Sarah to hear, but whatever he said made Michael's face go pale. The truck roared to life and tore out of the valley, spraying gravel. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, shaking uncontrollably. Rose and Margaret rushed to her side, but it was Joseph who knelt before her. He'll come back, Sarah whispered. You don't know him. He'll never stop. Then we'll be ready, Joseph said. But Sarah, you need to understand something. Men like your husband are cowards. They only hurt people who can't fight back. Here, you have people who will fight back. That changes everything. Sarah wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe that this wasn't just a temporary reprieve before Michael destroyed her completely. But as night fell and the settlement returned to normal, Sarah stood watch at the valley entrance, waiting for headlights that never came. Michael returned 3 days later, but not the way Sarah expected. The settlement's hunters found him at dawn, collapsed beside his truck 2 miles from the valley. He'd driven off the road in the night, and the desert had claimed him the way it claimed everyone who didn't respect its power. Dehydration. Exposure. Possibly a rattlesnake bite, though the damage to his leg made it hard to tell. He was unconscious when they loaded him onto a travois and brought him back. Sarah was feeding the horses when they arrived. She saw the body and knew immediately. Even broken and barely alive, she recognized the shape of him, the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 5 years. He's alive, Joseph said, watching her face carefully. Barely. We need to decide what to do with him. Sarah walked over slowly. Michael looked small somehow, diminished. Without his rage and violence to make him larger than life, he was just a man. Just fragile flesh and bone, no more powerful than any other creature the desert could kill. What are my options? Sarah asked. We can call for medical help. Get him to a hospital. Joseph paused. Or we can make him comfortable and let nature take its course. The choice is yours, Sarah. He's on our land, but this is your justice to claim. Sarah stared down at her husband. No, not her husband anymore. Just Michael. A man who'd hurt her because he could, because she'd been vulnerable and alone, because violence made him feel powerful. Part of her wanted to watch him die. That dark part that had been born in pain and fear, that had crawled through the desert wanting only to survive. That part whispered that the world would be better off without him, that this was righteous justice. But another part, newer and stronger, knew a different truth. Call for help, Sarah said quietly. Get him to a hospital. Joseph raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I'm not him, Sarah said, and the words felt like revelation. I won't become the monster just because I was victimized by one. He lives or dies by his own choices, not by mine. They called emergency services. While they waited, Margaret tended to Michael's wounds with the same care she'd given Sarah. He regained consciousness briefly, eyes focusing on Sarah's face. Please, he croaked. Help me. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No love. No hate. Just a vast emptiness where he'd once controlled her entire emotional world. I am helping you, she said. I'm saving your life. But after today, we're done. You'll sign divorce papers. You'll leave me alone. Or the next time you come into this desert looking for me, no one will find you at all. Michael tried to speak, but she'd already turned away. The helicopter arrived within the hour, kicking up massive dust clouds as it landed. Paramedics loaded Michael onto a stretcher. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, paused beside Sarah. You're his wife, she asked. Not anymore, Sarah replied. The paramedic glanced at Michael's unconscious form, then back to Sarah's healing bruises. Understanding flickered in her expression. Good for you, she said quietly. Stay strong. After the helicopter disappeared, the settlement fell quiet. Sarah walked to the edge of the valley and sat down, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of orange and red. Joseph joined her after a while, settling onto the rock beside her. How do you feel? He asked. Sarah considered the question. Different. Lighter somehow. Like I've been carrying him on my back all this time, and now he's finally gone. He might try to come back. Not here, but into your life somehow. Let him try. Sarah smiled, and it felt genuine. I know who I am now. He can't take that from me again. The weeks that followed brought changes. Sarah learned to hunt with the women, tracking rabbits across the desert. She learned to read the land, to find water, to survive in places that seemed impossible. Her body grew strong from work and clean living. Her mind grew stronger from peace and purpose. The divorce papers came through 3 months later. Michael had signed everything without contest, probably afraid of what might happen if he fought. Sarah held the document in her hands, proof that she was legally free, and felt something crack open in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize the sensation. Hope. She'd thought hope was dead, crushed under years of violence and fear. But it had survived, hidden away, waiting for safety to bloom. Sarah built a life in the valley. She helped tend the gardens, raised 2 foals from birth, and taught English to the settlement's children. She laughed again. She sang. She slept through entire nights without nightmares. And when new women arrived at the settlement, eyes haunted and bodies broken, running from their own monsters, Sarah was there to greet them. She knew what they needed because she'd needed it once. Safety. Understanding. The knowledge that they could survive this. The desert teaches us what we're made of, she told a young woman named Maria one evening. Maria had shown up 2 weeks ago, beaten so badly she could barely walk. It strips away everything false until only truth remains. And the truth is, we're stronger than we ever knew. Maria looked doubtful, the way Sarah had once looked. You don't believe me yet, Sarah continued. But you will. One day you'll wake up and realize that the woman you were died in that old life. And the woman you are now. She's a survivor. She's a warrior. She's someone who crossed through hell and chose to live. A year after her escape, Sarah stood in the same spot where Chief Joseph had found her dying. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and brutal and honest. She'd come full circle, but she was not the same woman who'd collapsed here. That woman had been broken, lost, desperate. This woman was whole. Found. Purposeful. Sarah turned back toward the valley, toward the settlement that had become her home, toward the people who'd shown her that family wasn't just blood, it was choice and loyalty and love. The desert had almost killed her. Instead, it had taught her how to live. And in the end, that made all the difference.